Please introduce yourself and briefly summarize your education and professional background.
So I am David Burkhart, the CEO at Garney. Professional career has been in the infrastructure space, water, wastewater infrastructure. I've spent my entire career here at Garney building water infrastructure. Um, from an education standpoint, I've got a degree in civil engineering from the University of Kansas.
Okay, so you explain what you do at Garney Equity Holdings, but what exactly do they do and what's the relation to the infrastructure industry?
So Garney Equity Holdings is the investment arm of Garney Companies. Garney is the largest water wastewater contractor in the U.S. That focuses solely on water infrastructure. So that is Garney's main business is water wastewater infrastructure and being a self-performed contractor in that space. Garney Equity Holdings, as I mentioned, is the investment arm. We hold a number of investments in various technologies, businesses, and in this case, this infrastructure fund that is targeted on investing in building, developing, owning, operating water and wastewater infrastructure across the U.S.
Okay, since you mentioned, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what this infrastructure fund is? The name, I believe, is called the Perennial Infrastructure Fund I. And what
Mm-hmm.
does your company, what's your role in it and its creation and management?
So we are invested in the fund in partnership with Perenfra, who is taking the leading role along with a number of other investors. But this fund is solely focused on water infrastructure, and that actually makes it a little bit unique from some of the various investment funds are available out there. A lot of those may target, especially today, various technologies where this one is focused strictly on assets in the ground, water infrastructure, whether it be pipelines, tanks, treatment plants, pump stations, hard assets that deliver water to consumers, whether private, public, or otherwise.
Okay, so why is this focused on water? Is that because of the companies involved or because you thought that there was a lack of a similar fund already there?
I would say a couple of reasons. There is a long-standing relationship with Garney and Perenfra that goes back many years in the water space. But why are we focused, or why is this fund focused exclusively on water assets? Is um, Well, most directly put, the infrastructure, especially water infrastructure in the U.S., has been underinvested in, we believe, for some time. When we think about infrastructure and we think about transportation, highways, people drive on them every day. As they get old and wear down, people see that, they notice that, come in, build new highways. Airports, as they age, as security protocols change, people see that, they notice that, government authorities step in, build new airports. Our water infrastructure is under the ground. Nobody sees it. Nobody thinks about it. Nobody worries about it until one of two things happen. Either it stops working, or there's not enough water available to grow the town, to grow the business, to bring in an industrial partner, a manufacturer into town, or to develop a new piece of land for housing. For those reasons, we believe that water infrastructures, just because people don't see it, they don't think about it, is why it's been underinvested. And at this point, we're seeing several things happen throughout the U.S. that are just calling on stronger, faster investments in this infrastructure to update aging infrastructure and to produce and develop new supplies of water to industrial users and others as we're looking to. I mean, look at the things that are going on across the U.S. now. We've got migration moving, people from California to Arizona, Texas, for example, folks moving from New York down to Florida. So we've got a lot of movement happening in the country. At the same time, we've got an onshoring or reshoring of manufacturing. Most of that manufacturing requires some type of water. So we're seeing those things happen. And then what I was touching on a moment ago with the aging of our infrastructure, a lot of what we rely on, especially in water, was built in the 50s and 60s and is beginning to reach the end of its useful lifespan, and all of this is happening at the same time. So that's why we feel it's important in an opportunity to invest in water infrastructure. And one quick statistic I would point you towards, because there was a recent study, and I've got it from the American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE, and this is the 2022 report, and I understand the 23 report is soon to be published. But in the 2022 report, ASCE grades our infrastructure in the U.S. every year on a grading scale similar to high school ABCDF. Across the U.S., drinking water from the ASCE, who's independent, drinking water received a grade of C+, wastewater received a grade of D+, and stormwater a grade of D. So as you look at the infrastructure, it needs rehabilitated, it needs rebuilt, and it needs expanded. And we can't do it quickly enough. So that's why this fund is focused on water infrastructure, and those hard assets.
All right, thanks, David. I think our audience does know a bit about how the water infrastructure is in dire straits, but they may not, like me, know exactly how these infrastructure funds work. Can you describe a little
Mhm.
bit about exactly how this works, kind of the process of how it takes money in and gets it towards infrastructure projects and what it hopes to accomplish?
It's straightforward in the sense that it's an investment fund. There is some complex nuance behind that, and a simple explanation, just like any fund or most funds, there's an opportunity for folks to invest in this at an LP level. Um, the fund will go through a series of closes. As those closes come, we will launch projects, and we've got a fairly extensive pipeline of projects, pun intended on that, pipeline of projects in the works to develop. And as a matter of fact, at this point, through that pipeline and the funds raised to date, there are four separate projects that are under contract, two that have been completed, and one that's actually reached the startup phase and is delivering water assets to a development in Texas.
Do funds like this make it any easier or more challenging to get funding to these projects than, for example, like a common system that we know where it's government funded?
Yeah, we think it's much easier and much faster. That's one of the advantages here, because in a traditional public procurement model or municipal project model, um, the front end of a project can extend for many years. You've got bond sales or public funding. Then the municipality or public owner hires an engineer that does the design, and then they go out to bid to hire a contractor. And then the project is built, and then it's started up, and then water's delivered. In this scenario, the front end of that is condensed, where the public funding or the bond sale aspect is not required. We have the funds available. And then the contracts are delivered through a design build model, where the contractor and engineer are working collaboratively to both design and construct the project, often in parallel. And this can greatly reduce the timeline to develop projects and deliver water.
How does the financing happen a little? I know you need money up front to start a project and there's continuing expenses. Does the money deliver from the fund in like incremental bots? Is that all lined up or is it all lumped up in the beginning?
Yeah, at this point, the projects developed through the fund have been relatively small, and that's by design, and they have been funded or financed exclusively from the fund. As things continue to move forward, we expect the scale of the projects to increase, as well as the dollars available in the fund. But as these incrementally grow, there's likely to be a finance component, an outside finance component that could be brought in to develop some of the larger projects that are being considered.
Okay, so I think I know the answer, but is this model adopted from other financial and business sectors? Is this something that was brought into, the infrastructure business and then now to water infrastructure in particular?
I would say that the model's there. It's been there. It's been used heavily in transportation is a good example. Um, but those models that have shown success in different environments for different infrastructure for different development of different things is now being pulled over into this water infrastructure space. So there's precedence, there's history. It works. But this is our first time bringing it over into the water infrastructure.
Okay, so I guess to help people like me clarify a little bit more, how is this similar or different to like an IPO model or a stock model that some of us are more familiar with?
The opportunity for investors to come in as limited partners. There is an expected return in a time frame that comes into play, and assuming all the objectives of the fund and the projects being developed hit their targets, then there are good returns for those LP investors.
Okay, I think I feel I know a lot more about this fund, but our audience is civil and structural engineers. So how do funds, this one in particular or funds like them, how will they help impact their jobs? Will they make more projects available to them? Will it be easier for them to fund these projects? How can it affect their lives and their jobs?
It could, I think, from the engineering space, there's an opportunity to fast track projects, whether it be as a designer, looking at some of these opportunities to become one of the design build partners in developing and implementing the construction of these projects. I think there's opportunity there. There's also opportunity, a lot of the water infrastructure's municipal public assets, right? But there's more and more private development happening these days. Engineers working with housing developers, industrial developers, where water utilities are needed, water assets are needed, but maybe they're struggling to figure out how to bring that water to their clients. And this would be an opportunity for those engineers, maybe working with a private or industrial client or a developer, to say, hey, here's an alternative means possibly to provide water to whatever it is you're developing. And so that would be an opportunity for them to provide better service to their clients.
Okay, so let's say hypothetically, if a project or a development is has been having trouble getting the financing in the typical model, how would they reach out to this fund and see if it could be funded that way?
Yeah, they should reach out directly to Jeff Nelson um, at Perenfra and explain their scenario, what they're looking at, what they would like to develop, how, when, timeline, who's on board, what's the demand, and have that conversation with Jeff and see if it might be a good fit. As I mentioned, we have presently quite an extensive pipeline of projects that we're looking at, evaluating, reviewing likelihood, size, scope, scale, demand, and beginning to work down through that list in what and when we develop those. So I would suggest anyone who's interested to reach out again directly to Jeff Nelson at Perenfra.
So as I was learning about this project, there was a line that claimed it's a first of its kind investment vehicle. What does that claim mean and why is that true?
Yeah, first of its kind in two parts. Again, I'd mentioned infrastructure funds have been around largely based in transportation. This is the first of its kind focused on water. And also unique to this is where many investment funds focus heavily on technologies. This is exclusively focused on hard assets in the ground, physical pipelines, pump stations, treatment plants, tanks, um, physical infrastructure that you can walk up, touch, feel, own. Um, and so that makes it different than something in the technology sector, for example.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. The hard assets is often not what people think of when they think of investing. But and why is that such an important part of this fund?
It's important to the core mission. It's important to Garney. It's important to Perenfra. At Garney, our purpose is building sustainable futures with the world's most precious resources, water and people. But the sustainable futures aspect of that is critical. We don't have a sustainable future without infrastructure, and infrastructure is physical. It is real. It is pipes. It is pumps, and those are the things that will, um, allow business to flourish in the U.S., allow the economy to continue, allow the onshoring, reshoring of manufacturing, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, you name it. All of those things require water, and we're excited to just play a role in helping provide that piece of the puzzle.
Are those last bits kind of some of the key enticements for investors? Because I noted in something else I read about the fund that technology investments are often heavily focused towards the intellectual property that this fund is more on a hard assets. Is that something that appeals to investors looking for hard assets?
I would certainly think so. That's certainly one of the things that really drew us to this. As a self-performed contractor, brick and mortar matters. Things that actually exist matter. Things that you can see, touch, feel, know that they're there. Um, I, I I know we are more comfortable investing in those things, and I suspect there are a lot of other investors out there as well. The biggest thing that I would probably point back to is the ASCE study and the real condition assessment of water assets in the U.S. Um, I think anyone that reviews that data that understands and takes this seriously, and you said it earlier, understands what condition our water wastewater infrastructure is in the U.S. And you consider what the current reality is, along with what we were trying to do in the U.S. economy, and you'll see an obvious gap there. And I think it's an obligation all of us have in this industry, water industry, or just businesses in the U.S. To find a way to close that gap and close it quickly. So I would encourage others just to continue to do the research, through ASCE or otherwise, and um, find find different ways to contribute. And in this scenario, have an opportunity to invest in something that's real and generate a return for themselves, their company, or other investors that they represent.